I hate my job.
The hum of fluorescent lights filled the cavernous space of the Carter Mart store in downtown Chicago. It was nearly 9:45 p.m., closing time, and the once bustling aisles now stood empty except for the distant squeak of a mop and the low rumble of the air conditioning system. Raymond Carter stood in the dim light of the employee restroom, staring at his reflection. The man in the mirror didn't look like a CEO tonight. Gone was the tailored navy suit, the Rolex, the polish that came with decades in the boardroom. In their place, faded gray coveralls with a stitched name tag that read Reggie Collins. His hands, once manicured and steady from years of signing contracts, were now roughened by the grit of the disguise, gloves, cleaning rags, and the faint sting of bleach. He took a deep breath, inhaling the sharp, chemical scent that clung to the air. This was the ground level of his empire, the part no quarterly report could ever capture. And for the first time in his career, Raymond wanted to see it for himself. Rumors had reached him quietly, complaints ignored, reports buried under layers of middle management. Workers quitting without notice. A store supervisor whose name came up too often in whispered tones, Ethan Grady. The regional director had dismissed it as routine labor friction. But when a customer service clerk sent an anonymous letter to corporate describing things that would make a man ashamed to wear your company's name, Raymond knew it was time to stop reading reports and start seeing reality. He adjusted his name badge one last time and stepped into the fluorescent glare of the maintenance hallway. The floors glistened from a fresh mop. Somewhere ahead, a vacuum hummed faintly, fading in and out like a heartbeat. As Raymond pushed his cleaning cart through the silent aisles, he noticed how different the store felt at night. During the day, it was all bright smiles, jazz music playing softly through the speakers, the scent of expensive candles near the home section. But now it was stripped of pretense. The shine was gone, and in its place he could see the bones of the place. Chipped tiles, flickering lights, stains the day staff never noticed. He was sweeping near aisle 9 when he heard it, the sound that made him stop cold. Crying. Soft at first, barely audible beneath the hum of the lights. Then a muffled sob, sharp enough to cut through the silence. Raymond followed the sound cautiously, each step heavy with dread. The crying grew clearer until he turned the corner near the janitor's supply closet. There, half hidden behind a stack of folded cardboard boxes, sat a woman in a faded blue uniform. Her shoulders trembled as she pressed a tissue to her face. He froze. The woman looked to be in her late 30s, maybe early 40s. Her hair was tied back under a store-issued cap, her hands red from scrubbing chemicals. A mop bucket sat beside her, half full of dirty water. "Hey," Raymond said quietly, not wanting to startle her. "You okay?" She startled anyway, wiping her eyes quickly. I'm fine," she said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Just allergies. The bleach, you know?" He nodded slowly. "Yeah, the bleach gets me too." For a few seconds, the only sound between them was the slow drip of water from the mop. "You new here?" she asked, finally looking at him. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but there was something sharp behind them. Distrust, maybe. "Yeah," Raymond replied. "Reggie Collins. Just started this week. Night crew." The woman nodded faintly. "I'm Lila Jackson." She went back to folding rags, her movements mechanical. Raymond waited, sensing there was more behind her silence. Finally he said softly, "If you ever need to talk, I got ears. Sometimes that helps." Lila's hands paused mid-fold. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was low and tired. "Talking doesn't fix hours getting cut. Doesn't fix when your check comes short and no one listens. Doesn't fix when your supervisor calls you slow and lazy in front of everyone." Raymond's stomach twisted. "Ethan Grady?" Her head jerked up, eyes narrowing. "You know him?" He hesitated. "He trained me during orientation." "Then you know what kind of man he is." She laughed bitterly and looked away, her gaze drifting to the fluorescent ceiling. "They say he's efficient. They say corporate loves him. You want to know what efficiency looks like, Reggie? It's doing 3 people's jobs for 1 person's pay. It's skipping your 10-minute break so you don't get written up. It's working through your lunch so you can clock out on time and still get home before sunrise." Her voice broke. "I used to love this job. I really did. But now I can't even afford my bus fare half the time." Raymond felt a burn rise behind his eyes. For years he had sat in sleek glass offices approving performance bonuses for regional managers who reduced labor expenses. He called it smart business. He'd called it lean operations. But hearing it like this, from the ground, from a woman too tired to cry quietly anymore, it sounded like something else. Cruel. He crouched down beside her. How long's this been going on? Months. Maybe longer. He cuts hours, changes schedules last minute, tells us it's all about efficiency. I reported it once. You know what happened? I got moved to night shift. Retaliation, Raymond muttered. What? Nothing. Just, sounds like they punished the wrong person. Lila sighed, her shoulders slumping. It's just how it is. People like me, we don't get hurt. We just get replaced. Raymond stood, the weight of her words pressing down like concrete. He wanted to tell her who he was, to promise her that help was coming, but he couldn't. Not yet. Not until he saw how deep this rot went. Lila, he said, keeping his voice steady, you're not invisible. Even if it feels that way. She gave him a tired smile. That's kind of you to say, Reggie. But around here, invisible's the only way to survive. As he walked away, pushing his cart down the empty aisle, Raymond felt something shift inside him. He'd come here looking for answers about profit margins and management ethics. What he found instead was a broken system built on silence, and a woman brave enough to cry when no one was supposed to be watching. When he reached the far end of the aisle, he looked back. Lila was still there, head bowed, her reflection trembling in the bucket of dirty water beside her. For the first time in his 30-year career, Raymond Carter felt ashamed of his own company. And deep down he knew things needed to change. The next evening, a pale drizzle slicked the streets of downtown Chicago. The city glowed beneath the orange haze of streetlights as Raymond, still Reggie to everyone in the store, arrived 15 minutes early for his shift. The rain had washed the sidewalks clean, but inside the store, something darker lingered. He scanned his employee badge at the side entrance. The security scanner buzzed, and the heavy door clicked open to the faint echo of laughter. Somewhere down the hall, men's voices carried through the corridor, rough and careless. Told her if she doesn't like her hours, she can take her lazy ass somewhere else. It was unmistakable, Ethan Grady. The man's voice had that sharp, corporate tone, half sarcasm, half swagger, that always seemed to thrive in middle management. Raymond slowed his steps, staying out of sight, listening from behind a stack of inventory boxes. Man, you're cold, another voice said, laughing. Ethan chuckled. Cold? No. Efficient. You give these people an inch, they'll take your whole schedule. I told Lila straight, this isn't charity. It's a job. You want hours? Prove you can earn them. Raymond clenched his fists. He could feel his pulse tighten in his neck. He peeked around the corner and finally saw him, Ethan Grady, the store supervisor. Late 30s, tall, wearing a black Raymer polo shirt and a silver watch that gleamed under the fluorescent lights. His hair was slicked back and his smile never reached his eyes. Raymond had seen his type before. Men like him built their reputations on loyalty upward and cruelty downward. All right, boys, Ethan said, straightening his collar. Let's get this floor spotless tonight. We've got regional inspection next week. If corporate likes what they see, there's a bonus in it, for some of us. The others laughed. Ethan slapped one on the shoulder and walked off, his cologne trailing behind like arrogance in motion. Raymond waited until the hall cleared, then moved toward the supply closet. Lila was already there, pulling gloves from a box, her face pale under the harsh light. You all right? Raymond asked quietly. She gave him a stiff nod. Yeah. Just another day. He wanted to say something more, but Ethan appeared at the doorway, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. Reggie, right? Raymond turned. Yes, sir. Ethan smiled thinly. Welcome to the team. I heard you've been doing decent work. Let's keep it that way, yeah? No slacking, no gossiping, and definitely no crying on company time. Lila froze. Raymond's stomach twisted. Ethan's eyes flicked toward her, and he smirked as if proud of the wound he'd just reopened. Understood, Raymond said evenly. Ethan patted his shoulder with mock friendliness. Good man. We like team players here. The kind who know when to keep their head down. When he walked away, the silence that followed was heavy enough to choke on. Lila whispered, You see what I mean? Raymond nodded slowly, forcing his voice to stay calm. Yeah, I see it. For the next few hours he worked side by side with her, cleaning glass displays, wiping down counters, emptying bins. Every so often Ethan would appear again just to criticize. That's streaky, Reggie. Do it again. You missed a spot, Lila. Don't make me repeat myself. It was never about the cleaning, it was about control. About making people feel small. At 1:12 a.m., Lila's phone buzzed in her apron pocket. She pulled it out, saw the caller ID and sighed. My son's waiting. He can't sleep till I get home. Ethan's voice came from behind. Phone's away, Lila. You know the rules. It's just a text. Rules, he said, stepping closer, don't care about reasons. Something inside Raymond snapped. He turned, meeting Ethan's eyes with quiet steadiness. She's been on her feet 5 hours straight. You could let her text her kid. Ethan's smile faltered. Excuse me? I said, Raymond replied evenly, it's one text. Doesn't seem like much to ask. The room fell silent. Ethan took a step closer, lowering his voice. You new here, Reggie. You don't get to tell me how to run my store. Raymond held his stare. Just seems like basic decency. For a moment, neither man moved. Then Ethan's lips curved into a grin that didn't reach his eyes. All right, Reggie. You want to play hero? Fine. But don't say I didn't warn you. He turned and walked away. Lila exhaled shakily. You shouldn't have done that. He'll find a way to make you pay for it. Raymond looked at her, the weight of truth pressing behind his calm. I've been paying for silence my whole life, Lila. Maybe it's time someone paid for speaking up. She blinked, startled by the conviction in his tone. By the end of the shift, the air between them had shifted, still tense but charged with quiet understanding. As the dawn began to tint the Chicago skyline, Raymond stepped outside into the cold. The street smelled of rain and exhaust. He pulled out his phone, opened his corporate contact list, and stared at the names he'd once trusted. He had seen enough tonight to know, the problem wasn't just one man. It was the culture. The machine. The quiet, efficient cruelty that wore a smile and called itself management. And for the first time, Raymond wasn't thinking like a CEO. He was thinking like a man who'd seen his company's soul, and found it rotten. By the next week, Chicago had sunk into one of those gray stretches where the sky looked like unpolished steel and the wind carried a sharp bite. The store's glass front reflected the overcast gloom as Raymond, still in his janitor uniform, still Reggie, pushed a mop bucket down the long main aisle. Every few seconds he'd glance toward the management office near the back, where Ethan's blinds were half drawn. Inside, laughter occasionally drifted out. Not the kind that comes from joy, but the smug kind born of control. Raymond's expression stayed neutral, but his mind worked like machinery behind the calm. He'd spent 5 nights studying the operation from the inside, and what he'd uncovered so far went beyond one abusive manager. It was systemic. Schedules accidentally deleted, forcing employees to show up unpaid to prove loyalty. Payroll discrepancies under review for months. Workers like Lila forced into voluntary overtime that was never logged, while Ethan reported inflated efficiency numbers to corporate for bonuses. On paper, the store looked like a model of productivity. In reality, it was built on fear. That night, Raymond decided it was time to dig deeper. At 11:48 p.m., the store was nearly empty, just 3 night shift workers mopping floors and Ethan in his office. Raymond glanced around before slipping into the maintenance corridor that led to the back offices. He'd memorized the code earlier that week when Ethan had carelessly typed it in front of him. He entered the room quietly, the hum of computers filling the air. The office smelled of cheap cologne and old coffee. Stacks of reports sat on the desk, but what caught his attention were the 2 monitors glowing faintly in the dark. Payroll. Scheduling. Performance metrics. Raymond sat down and opened a file labeled Staff Adjustments, Q2. His jaw tightened as he scrolled. Dozens of names. Hours reduced. Benefits removed. All marked Approved by E. Grady. And at the bottom, a line item marked Corporate Compliance Review, Delayed, Pending CEO Signature. That was his name. Raymond Carter. He stared at the signature field, his digital initials forged to approve the fraud. He leaned back slowly, feeling something inside him go cold. This wasn't just Ethan taking advantage. Someone higher had been enabling it. Footsteps approached. Raymond closed the window instantly and grabbed a rag from the desk just as Ethan's voice rang out behind him. What the hell are you doing in here? Raymond turned calmly. Cleaning, sir. The door was open. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Nobody cleans my office at night. Just following the schedule, Raymond said, feigning confusion. Maintenance rotation, remember? Ethan stepped closer, the fluorescent light catching the silver of his watch. You think I don't know what you're doing? I've seen your type. Come in all polite, act quiet, but you're always looking for trouble. Raymond held his gaze without flinching. Just doing my job, sir. Ethan studied him for a long, tense moment, then finally smirked. Right. Do it somewhere else. Raymond nodded and left, his pulse steady despite the storm rising inside him. As soon as he reached the supply room, he took out his phone and uploaded a few photos he'd managed to snap of the payroll files. The evidence was there, altered records, stolen wages, and his forged approval. But if he exposed Ethan now, the company would circle the wagons. He needed something bigger, proof that this wasn't an isolated case. He decided to stay another week. Over the next days, the truth unfolded piece by piece, like a grim mosaic. A cashier named Tanya had been promised a promotion that never came. Her evaluations were spotless, but her file showed repeated attendance violations that she swore never happened. An older stock worker, Luis, had been demoted after 20 years because automation was replacing his role, yet his replacement was a young recruit doing the exact same job for half the pay. And every single complaint had been filtered through the same person, Ethan. The pattern was clear. Ethan manipulated the system, inflated metrics, and cut costs through human exploitation, all while corporate saw him as a rising star. Each night, Raymond documented more evidence. Photos, copies of schedules, audio snippets from conversations. He hid his phone under the mop bucket and let it record Ethan berating employees. By the fifth night, the audio file captured something far worse. Ethan, laughing with another supervisor, bragged openly about how he skimmed from payroll. "Man, corporate has no clue," Ethan chuckled. "You trim a few hours here, move a few bonuses there. Boom, the numbers look perfect. I call it management math. And nobody notices? Please," Ethan scoffed. "They love me up there. I save them money, they send me gift cards and employee excellence emails. You think anyone actually checks the records?" Raymond's knuckles tightened around the mop handle. He'd heard enough. 2 days later, a corporate memo arrived. Regional Performance Review, Store Number 412, Chicago Division. Ethan strutted through the store like a general preparing for parade inspection. He barked orders, rearranged shelves, and forced staff to stay overtime, unpaid of course, to make the place shine. Lila was back on shift that night, moving slowly, her face pale. When she bent to scrub a floor corner, Raymond noticed the bandage wrapped around her wrist. "What happened?" he asked quietly. "Cleaning solution spill," she said, trying to smile. "Didn't get time off to see a doctor." Raymond's throat tightened. "You reported it?" She gave him a bitter laugh. "To who? Ethan?" He said, "Accidents aren't covered for part-timers. But I've been full-time for months." He stared at her, then exhaled slowly. "Lila, would you trust me if I said this isn't the end?" She looked at him, her eyes tired but curious. "What do you mean?" He hesitated. The urge to tell her everything, to reveal who he truly was, burned in his chest. But not yet. Not until he could make it count. "You'll see," he said softly. "Soon." That night, when the last light in the store flicked off, Raymond sat in the employee lounge typing on his phone. He composed a message to the company's chief ethics officer, a direct report to him at headquarters. But he didn't sign it as Raymond Carter. He signed it as Reggie Barnes, janitor, store number 412. And in that message he laid it all bare: names, files, forged signatures, and the systemic abuse that had infected his company from the ground up. When he hit send, his chest felt both heavy and clean. He'd seen enough to know what needed to happen next. Tomorrow the masks would come off. That night, as the rain began again and thunder rumbled over Chicago's skyline, Raymond looked out across the parking lot where exhausted workers trudged home. He thought of his father, who'd once mopped floors in a warehouse not far from here, who used to say, "Power's not about money, son. It's about how you treat people when nobody's watching." Raymond finally understood. Tomorrow everybody would be watching. The morning of the inspection dawned gray and restless over Chicago. Rain had slicked the streets outside Carter Mart number 412, and the city's skyline shimmered faintly through a curtain of mist. Employees arrived early, their breath visible in the chill air as they hurried inside. Ethan was already there, barking orders before the clock even hit 7. His voice cut through the hum of fluorescent lights. "Floors spotless. Displays perfect. And someone tell Tanya to lose that attitude before corporate gets here." No one answered. They just nodded and scattered. Fear had become routine. In the back corner, Raymond Carter, still in his janitor's uniform, still Reggie, was polishing the glass doors of the break room when Ethan's reflection appeared behind him. "You," Ethan said sharply. "After this, take care of the loading bay. We've got inspectors coming from headquarters, big shots. Don't let them see you slacking." "Yes, sir," Raymond said evenly, wringing out his mop. Ethan sneered, straightened his tie, and walked off without a second glance. Raymond's hands tightened on the handle. Big shots from headquarters. He wondered if any of them realized the man they'd be reporting to was already in the building. He looked at his watch, 8:42 a.m. The regional inspection was scheduled for 9. He took a deep breath, checked the phone in his pocket. The message he'd sent to the chief ethics officer had been opened. Read. Forwarded. He hadn't received a reply, but that didn't matter. Today he wasn't waiting for anyone's permission. He'd built this company on the promise that every worker mattered. Today he was going to remind them of that, even if it meant burning down his own reputation to do it. At 9:05 a.m., 3 sleek black sedans pulled into the parking lot. Ethan straightened his blazer and practically jogged to the door to greet them. "Good morning. Welcome to Carter Mart number 412, he said, flashing the smile of a man desperate to impress. "We're honored to have you here." Out stepped 2 corporate auditors and one familiar face, Olivia Hughes, the company's chief ethics officer. A sharp woman in her early 40s, known for her calm poise and sharper mind. Ethan didn't notice the faint glint in her eyes when she scanned the store, or the phone she discreetly pulled from her coat pocket. Raymond watched from the cleaning aisle, hidden behind a rack of supplies. His pulse thudded steadily. He hadn't seen Olivia in months, not since the last board retreat. He trusted her judgment, but today she wasn't here for pleasantries. She was here because of his message. The tour began. Ethan strutted like a man on stage, rattling off numbers and efficiency stats. "As you can see, productivity has increased 15% this quarter," he boasted, waving at the staff who were working double time to maintain the illusion. "Employee morale is the highest in the district. I make sure to run a tight ship." Olivia nodded politely, but her gaze lingered, on Lila's bandaged wrist, on Tanya's forced smile, on the way employees avoided eye contact. She took silent notes. Raymond followed at a distance, pushing his mop like any other worker. No one gave him a second look. By the time they reached the break room, Ethan was glowing with confidence. "I believe this store represents the standard of excellence Carter Mart stands for," he said proudly. "Isn't that right, folks?" A few scattered nods. No one dared contradict him. Olivia folded her arms. "That's impressive, Mr. Grady. Would you mind if we spoke with a few employees privately?" Ethan hesitated just for a moment. "Of course," he said, smiling too wide. "But you'll find we're all one big family here." Olivia smiled back. "I look forward to meeting your family." An hour passed. Ethan grew restless as Olivia and the auditors interviewed employees one by one. Their stories began to overlap: missing wages, unpaid overtime, altered time sheets. Quietly, the image Ethan had built began to crack. In the hallway, Raymond mopped in silence, listening as Ethan paced near the offices, muttering to himself. "Idiots. All of them. Don't they know who keeps this place running?" Raymond looked up, and decided it was time. He left his mop by the wall and walked toward the conference room. Each step felt heavier than the last. Inside, Olivia sat at the head of the table, the auditors beside her, reviewing a thick folder of printed documents, the same ones Raymond had photographed days ago. Ethan stood at the far end, sweating despite the air conditioning. "Excuse me," Raymond said, his voice steady. Ethan turned, furious. "What are you doing here? This is a private meeting." Olivia looked up, and their eyes met. A flicker of recognition passed between her and Raymond. She gave the faintest nod. "I asked him to come," Olivia said calmly. Ethan blinked. "What? You know this janitor?" Raymond stepped forward, unzipping his uniform slowly. The fluorescent lights reflected off the small gold pin he wore beneath, the Carter Mart corporate insignia. The room went still. Olivia leaned back, silent. The auditors froze mid-note. Ethan's voice cracked. "Wait, what is this?" Raymond removed the cap from his head, revealing a calm, composed expression that no janitor carried. "My name," he said softly, "is Raymond Carter." The silence that followed could have swallowed the air itself. Ethan's face drained of color. "Carter? As in CEO Carter?" Raymond nodded. "The same." Olivia closed the folder in front of her. "Mr. Grady," she said, her tone suddenly sharp as glass. "Would you like to explain why your payroll records contain forged executive signatures and falsified employee data?" Ethan stammered. "This has to be a mistake." Raymond held up a hand. "No mistake." His voice was calm, but each word hit like a hammer. "I came here because something didn't feel right. Numbers don't lie, Ethan, but people do. And I've seen enough of your lies to last a lifetime." Ethan took a step back. "Sir, please, I was only following procedures." "Procedures don't exploit workers," Raymond interrupted. "Procedures don't forge signatures or dock wages or silence complaints. You did that. You built your success on fear." Olivia slid a stack of papers across the table, Ethan's own reports, his falsified files, and the recordings Raymond had collected. "We have enough to open a full ethics investigation," she said. "Effective immediately, you are suspended pending review." Ethan's mouth opened but no sound came. Security arrived moments later, silent and efficient. As they led him out, he turned back toward Raymond, his face twisted in disbelief. "You set me up." Raymond met his gaze. "No," he said quietly. "You set yourself up. I just stopped cleaning your mess." When the door closed behind Ethan, the room exhaled. Olivia looked at Raymond, her expression softening. "You could have sent a memo. You didn't have to come here yourself." "I did," Raymond said. "Numbers tell one story. People tell another. I needed to see what kind of story my company had become." She nodded slowly. "You've seen it now." "I have," he said. "And it's not one I'm proud of." He looked out the glass wall of the conference room. Beyond it, workers stood quietly watching through the reflection. Lila, Tanya, Luis, their faces a mix of shock, hope, and disbelief. Raymond opened the door and stepped into the open floor. "Everyone," he began, his voice carrying through the silence, "I owe you an apology. I built this company to stand for integrity and fairness. Somewhere along the way that got lost. But that ends today." The employees stared, unsure if they should clap, cry, or simply breathe. "You've been underpaid, overlooked, and disrespected," Raymond continued. "That changes now. Every lost hour will be restored. Every false record corrected. And every one of you deserves to work in a place that sees you, really sees you." Lila's eyes shimmered. Tanya wiped a tear. Even Luis, the old stock worker, nodded slowly, his jaw tight. For the first time in years, the store was silent, not from fear but from the weight of something real. Oh. That night, long after the inspectors had left and the store was closed, Raymond stood alone in the parking lot, watching the rain fall on the asphalt. He thought of the faces he'd seen, the stories he'd heard, the truth he'd uncovered. He wasn't just cleaning up a store anymore. He was cleaning up a legacy. And somewhere deep in the city, thunder rolled, not as a warning but as applause. Tomorrow the rebuilding would begin. But tonight, Raymond Carter finally felt like the man his father had raised him to be. 2 weeks after the storm that shook Carter Mart number 412, the air inside the Chicago store felt different. Lighter, though not yet free. The fluorescent hum still buzzed, the automatic doors still hissed open and closed, but the weight that had once hung over the workers had begun to lift, one quiet shift at a time. Outside, the city was thawing under the first hints of spring. Morning sunlight cut through the glass facade, washing over the aisles like a quiet blessing. Inside, employees whispered with cautious hope as they moved between shelves. Raymond Carter stood by the front entrance, not as a CEO inspecting from a distance, but as a man rediscovering what his company really meant. He wore no suit today, just a simple blue shirt and a name tag that read Raymond, Operations Team. He didn't want to be seen as the man from the top floor anymore. He wanted to be seen as one of them. Lila approached from the cleaning aisle, her uniform neatly pressed, the faint pink scar on her wrist mostly healed. She hesitated before speaking, her voice small but sincere. "Morning, Mr. Carter." He smiled. "Morning, Lila. Please, it's just Raymond now." She laughed nervously. "Still feels weird calling you that. Last time I saw you, you were pushing a mop." He chuckled softly. "And I learned a lot doing it." Her expression turned thoughtful. "People talk about that day. They say it was like watching a movie, seeing you tell off Mr. Grady like that. We thought, people like him never get caught." Raymond nodded slowly. "People like him only get caught when others stop being afraid to speak." Her eyes lowered. "You gave us that courage." He shook his head. "No, Lila. You gave me clarity. I saw what I'd stopped seeing years ago, the real cost of silence." A quiet pause settled between them. Then Lila looked around as if checking no one was watching and said, "They said you're bringing in new policies. Real ones to protect workers." "That's the plan," he replied. "Fair hours. Proper benefits. A direct reporting system that doesn't go through people like Grady. Every employee will have a voice that can't be buried." Lila's lips trembled, her eyes glistening. "It's about time someone at the top remembered what it feels like down here." Raymond smiled gently. "You helped remind me." That afternoon, the store hosted something it hadn't seen in years, a staff meeting that everyone actually wanted to attend. Chairs were arranged in neat rows near the front displays. For once, no one tried to look busy to avoid being scolded. Raymond stood in front of them, no podium, no script. Just truth. "When I started Carter Mart," he began, I wanted to build a place where hard work was respected and dignity was standard. But as we grew, I stopped walking these floors. I stopped listening. Somewhere along the way, people like Ethan Grady filled that silence. The employees listened closely, not because they had to, but because it finally felt like their story was being told. Raymond continued, his voice steady, deep with conviction. I watched the security footage from last month, the long hours, the empty shelves, the exhaustion on your faces. I saw everything I had once promised to protect being neglected. And that's on me. But I'm here now to make it right. He gestured toward a small table beside him, stacked with documents. These are revised employment contracts. No more forged hours. No more unpaid overtime. Every employee's role will be reviewed. And those who were wronged will receive back pay for every lost cent starting today. A ripple of murmurs moved through the crowd, disbelief first, then quiet relief. Luis, the older stock worker, raised his hand. Sir, Raymond, he corrected himself awkwardly, how do we know things won't go back to how they were once this dies down? Raymond nodded, appreciating the question. Because it won't just be me watching anymore. We're establishing an independent employee committee, workers from every level of this store, to oversee operations, fairness, and safety. If a manager crosses the line, they won't be reporting to HR that works for him. They'll report to people who understand what it's like to be on that floor. Applause started quietly, then grew. But Raymond lifted his hand, his tone soft but deliberate. I don't want applause. I want accountability, mine included. If this company ever starts losing its humanity again, I expect every one of you to hold me accountable. Deal? Deal? They said almost in unison. It wasn't just words. Something real had shifted. For the first time, the workers believed the man in charge might actually see them. Later that week, Ethan Grady's name was officially removed from Carter Mart's management roster. Corporate announced a full audit of every store in the Midwest region. Olivia Hughes led the ethics review herself, uncovering similar practices in several other locations. Dozens of employees across the state finally received back pay and reinstated benefits. It was a ripple effect, one store's truth shaking an entire system awake. Raymond watched it unfold quietly from his office, a modest workspace above the store, not the downtown glass tower he'd once ruled from. The walls here smelled faintly of cleaning detergent and cardboard, but somehow it felt more honest than any boardroom ever had. He sat at his desk, scrolling through employee testimonials. Some were thankful, others still cautious. A few were angry, not at him but at what had been allowed to happen for so long. He welcomed all of it. Anger meant people cared again. On a Friday evening, as the city lights blinked on across Chicago's skyline, Raymond received a knock at his door. It was Tanya, the cashier whose promotions had been delayed for years. She stepped inside, holding a letter. I just wanted to say thank you, she said softly. I got promoted this morning. Assistant floor manager. Legit this time. Raymond smiled warmly. You earned it, Tanya. She hesitated before speaking again. You know, my dad used to tell me stories about you, back when Carter Mart opened. Said you were one of the few businessmen who talked about fairness like it meant something. He looked down for a moment, the weight of his past visible in his eyes. I used to believe that every decision I made mattered. Then I got comfortable. She smiled faintly. You found your way back. He returned the smile. With help. As she left, Raymond turned toward the window overlooking the store floor. Workers laughed softly as they restocked aisles, no longer flinching at the sound of footsteps. There was music playing from someone's phone. The kind of sound a healthy workplace makes, ordinary, alive, and free. The following Monday, a local Chicago news outlet ran a segment titled, The CEO Who Went Undercover, How One Man Exposed Corruption in His Own Company. The story went viral overnight. Thousands of comments poured in online, some praising his courage, others questioning his motives, but nearly all struck by the same thing. The idea that someone in power had finally chosen empathy over image. By the next morning, sales at Carter Mart had doubled, not because of marketing but because people wanted to support a company that stood for something again. But Raymond didn't celebrate profit. He celebrated purpose. That evening he returned to the store, walking the aisles with a cup of coffee in hand. The floors gleamed under soft light. He stopped near the cleaning supply section and smiled faintly at the sight of a mop bucket identical to the one he'd used as Reggie. Olivia Hughes joined him moments later, leaning against a shelf. You know, not many CEOs would survive what you just did, she said. I didn't want to survive it, Raymond replied. I wanted to learn from it. She studied him. So what's next? He took a slow sip of coffee. We rebuild. Not just here, everywhere. We train better managers. We protect the quiet ones. And maybe, we start reminding corporate America that ethics aren't optional. Olivia nodded approvingly. That's a legacy worth leaving. As the night deepened, Raymond stepped outside into the cool Chicago air. The wind carried the distant rhythm of the city, trains, sirens, laughter. Above, the skyscrapers glowed like distant constellations. He looked back at the store one last time before heading home. Through the glass, he could still see Lila wiping down the counters, Tanya laughing with a customer, Luis closing a register. He smiled to himself. Justice isn't always loud, he murmured. Sometimes it's just the sound of people finally working without fear. He turned toward the parking lot, hands in his pockets, the faint glow of streetlights reflecting off the wet pavement. And as he walked away, one simple truth echoed in his mind, the same lesson his father had taught him years ago. If you ever build something, make sure it lifts people higher than it lifts you. That night, Raymond Carter knew he finally had. Epilogue, a note to the audience. If you've stayed with this story till now, thank you. What you just experienced wasn't just fiction. It's a reflection of real issues happening in workplaces every day. Somewhere, someone like Lila is still afraid to speak up. Someone like Raymond hasn't yet realized what's happening under his own name. Stories like this moved you, share them. Start a conversation. Talk about leadership, empathy, and justice in the places that matter, your home, your job, your circle. And if you believe more people need to hear stories that remind us what humanity in business looks like, then take a moment to like, subscribe, and share this video. Not just to support the channel, but to support the change these stories are meant to inspire. Because change starts with awareness. And awareness starts with you.